If you are looking for all things real estate and an in-depth look at market fluctuations and answers to all your buying and selling questions, look no further than real estate expert Lisa Hill. Lisa brings her vast 15-year knowledge directly to you every week, sharing her own struggles as she navigates you through the twists and turns of the real estate world. Lisa has been sober for 9 years and has been motivating people ever since. A speaker, mentor, and teacher, each week Lisa will welcome guests from all facets of the industry to ensure you are as informed as possible before making any real estate decisions. This is the Lisa Hill Show, real estate for the real world.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Lisa Hill Show, real estate for the real world. I am your host, Lisa Hill, and it is crazy right now in the real estate market. I'll tell you, it is absolutely 100% a seller's market, and things are flying off the market. And what we're seeing a lot of is a lot more inventory coming on, but with the market picking up, a lot of people are wanting to sell their investment properties and their rental properties. So it brings up a whole nother issue, which is how do you sell your rental property with a tenant or an occupant living in there? And there's a couple of different ways that we can go about it. So, and that's the main thing that I get. People call and say, hey, Lisa, I know that the market's really good right now. There's a ton of equity in my house. I want to sell. I've had this rental property for, a few years, been looking for the right time to sell. I want to sell now. What do I do? And it's a question that I hear over and over again. In the last, I'd say 4 or 5 properties that I've sold have had rental. They've been rentals. They've had renters or tenants in there. So there's a few different ways we can do it. Right now, with the way the market is they're going to sell fast. I mean, if a property is priced correctly, it'll sell in this market. Absolutely. So one of the options, so the first option, which is probably the path of least resistance as far as selling a property with a tenant in there, is to sell your property to an investor. So basically, you put the property on the market and your tenant would just have a new landlord. So nothing would change. You would keep the renter in there, sell the property, a new landlord would take over. Now, in this market, we are not seeing a lot of that happening or taking place for a couple reasons. Right now, rents are still pretty decent, but the amount of the value right now that you can sell something for is catching up to those rents. So they're not even out quite yet. So we are seeing rental increases on some of the rental properties. But if you've had a tenant in there for, the last several years, unless you've made an effort to increase their rent every year over year, they're probably paying below market rent. So for an investor looking to purchase an investment property and receive cash flow, it might not be the best fit for them. So it's on a case-by-case basis. But, if you're looking to sell, if your property value is up to $400,000 and you have a renter, they're paying $1,000 a month, it's not a good investment. So it's not really appealing to an investor to buy a property that's receiving, negative cash flow. So you cut out a lot of the buyers and a lot of the market with that happening. So again, it would have to make sense, and you have to look at it like an investor. When you're selling your property, you want to, and your agent probably should do this, but to think of it as you're the buyer. Why would you buy this? If you're not going to buy it as an investment because it's not a good investment, because there's not cash flow, then nobody else probably is either. So keep that in mind. If it is, again, on the other hand, if it has good cash flow, you're selling the property, for $150,000 and the tenants in there paying, $1,200-$1,300 in rent. Well, yeah, of course, investor is going to want to pick that property up. So then that would sell more. So it'd be more enticing for an investor to sell. Right now, with the way the market is, we're not seeing a whole lot of that. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's just not the majority in regards to single family homes selling. Okay. So that's the first option. And again, it's a little bit, it's easier because essentially nothing changes. So you have your tenant in there and then you sell the property and they have a new landlord. Easy. But right now, not seeing a lot of that. Now, the second option is to have the tenant vacate the property, fix it up, and then sell it. So on the good side of it, you can get more, you're going to get more money that way, for several reasons. Number one, it's a lot easier to show a property that's vacant, hands down. It's easier whether it's or tenant's been in there or, it's your primary house. It's easier to sell a home that is completely vacant or just slightly staged because there's not that personalized, there's not any clutter, there's no odors or smells, or you didn't just cook dinner and somebody came through and they don't like onions and you cooked onions or with a lot of garlic. Those small things can turn prospective buyers off. So it's good in the sense that you can sell a vacant property. It shows a lot better. Photographs are better. More people can see it. It's always available. But on the negative side, one of the downsides is you leave a property vacant and it can lead to maybe break-ins or theft or squatters going in the house, which we see some of that, especially in the at nighttime. If there's a vagrant, they know that the property is vacant and nobody's been in there, they might break in, and they could potentially damage or steal things. So that's one of the downsides, and it would depend on the neighborhood that you're selling your rental property in. If it's not a good neighborhood and there's a higher crime rate and a high rate of burglaries and break-ins, then I probably would not advise that to go that route, because you might end up, it might show better, but in the long run, the loss of rents that you're going to get from moving a tenant out and the potential damage of theft is probably not worth it. So you want to definitely look at that as an option as well. So again, on the plus side, it's great because then it's vacant and easy to show. You can go in, make repairs as necessary, and then sell it. So that's your second option. Now, your third option is what we are definitely seeing a lot of, is providing the tenants notice to vacate. So what we're doing is, I wouldn't, again, several months ago, I probably wouldn't suggest this, or even last year, I wouldn't suggest this. But right now, the way that properties are selling, if you provide a tenant a 60-day notice to vacate, your home will probably be sold within that time period. So you're not going to see a loss of rents and you won't have a house sitting vacant. So that's what we're seeing a lot of, is once we put the house on the market, we are providing the occupants with a notice to vacate. Now, again, this gets in California. So if you're listening out there in this podcast, I'm based in California. California has the absolute most strictest tenant landlord laws, and they're definitely in favor of the tenant, not in favor of the landlord. So you don't even have to have a rental agreement to be an occupant, and you could be a squatter and you have tenant rights. So we definitely want to be careful when we have a tenant landlord situation. We want to make sure we provide adequate notice. It's not always a 30-day notice. If they've lived in the property over a year in California, then you have to provide a 60-day notice, not a 30-day notice. So, and then same thing with Section 8 or subsidized housing. If you have a tenant in there that is receiving government assisted, or Section 8, then it's a 90-day notice. And so be careful when you are providing these notices that it is, again, it's definitely not in the favor of the landlords. It's California, and it is very, very heavily geared to protect the tenant. So as a landlord, you have to be very careful when doing that. So getting back to the option, so providing tenant notice to vacate, and then we put the house on the market. So that will give us, plenty of time to put the house on the market the property, get it into escrow, and get it sold. And it should be about that time the tenant's moving out and we're closing escrow so that the new buyer can take occupancy. So one of the other things, we want to be extra when you're selling your investment property. I always like to think of it like if people were coming into my home. And I wouldn't like to be disrupted either, especially if I'm not getting a benefit out of it. So for the tenants, we want to make it as easy as possible to show the property. So instead of saying at any time during the week at any point, anybody can come in and show the property and just knock on the door. We definitely don't want that. Again, it makes it not as easy to sell the property if it's not accessible at all times. But if we set up expectations in advance and let the tenant know, hey, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, between 5 p.m. 7 p.m. people could potentially make appointments to come in. They're a little bit more agreeable, because if we say to a tenant, hey, at any time, at any point, anyone can come in. Oh, by the way, keep the house clean. By the way, don't leave any food out. Don't cook anything that smells bad. And just basically live your life around selling the house. And oh, by the way, you have to find a new place to live. They're not going to be as agreeable. I mean, I don't think I would be that agreeable either if somebody came in and made demands on me. So you want to make it as easy to work with the tenants as possible, because then they'll be easier to work with you. I've seen some nightmare situations with tenants that hold the property hostage. You want to sell the house, and they'll drag it on and on and on. And again, California tenant rights, and they can drag on and on and on, and stay in the property, especially if you don't go by the book. So we definitely want to be careful in that sense. And I think just on a human level, having that, that respect and setting expectations up front, because during the process, the escrow process, the buyers will need to get back into the property at certain points. So not only are they disrupted during the showing of the process of the property, during the process of showing the property, also during the escrow period, they will need to access the property for appraisals, inspections, and walkthroughs. And so it's definitely not the tenants are going to be inconvenienced. And so we definitely do want to make sure that, I always, when I take a listing and there's a tenant, I always go over and I introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Lisa, be putting the property on the market. If anyone knocks on the door, I've told them not to disturb you, but if they do, call me. Here's my card. We'll make the showings as easy as possible. We'll try to not disrupt anything. And usually they're pretty agreeable. I mean, if you go to people on like I said, on a human level, then they're a little bit more agreeable than if you're just, shove a notice on their door and tell them to get out, and you don't talk to them, and you tell them when you have to open the door for strangers walking through your house and looking in your closets. They're not going to be as agreeable. So, we've had, like I said, nightmare stories where they won't leave, or they say they're leaving, and I want to believe them. And one time I had a tenant. She said, yeah, I'm moving out. The U-Haul truck is here. I'm getting out. And I drove by the house. There was no U-Haul truck, and she was not moving out, and she had no intention of moving out. Her intention was just to stay in the property, not paying rent as long as possible, because that was the original reason why we were selling the property, is she had not been paying rent for 2 months. And so my client said, hey, I just want to sell it. She hasn't paid rent. She's not a very good tenant. I just want to be done with it. I don't want to be a landlord anymore. I don't want to put another tenant in there. I don't want to clean up. I just want to sell it. So yeah, this tenant, she stayed in. It was about 5 months that we worked on having her vacate the property, and she drug it out, went to court, made up some stories that it wasn't, habitable. There were rats and whatnot, which wasn't true, of course, but nonetheless, she did end up vacating. He did end up selling the property. So it worked out, but it can get a little bit tricky. So to minimize, scenarios like that, again, those are the 3 main options, and it's really going to depend on, number one, your situation, how bad you need to sell, and the type of tenant that you have in there. If you have a great tenant in there, they probably be understanding, and hey, they might even be able to buy a house, and so you can introduce them to your agent and say, hey, you're a great tenant, you pay rent on time, unfortunately I have to sell. By the way, do you want to maybe look into home ownership? Because right now, with the way interest rates are and the programs we have, a lot of people who are great tenants, because all homeowners are tenants at some point, right? So maybe that tenant could be a homeowner and get into home ownership, and then it's a win-win. So again, those are the ways that you can sell your house with the tenant in it. All right. See you guys next week.
Thanks for stopping by the Lisa Hill Show. For more information, please visit lisahillteam.com. Catch us on the next episode when Lisa brings you more real estate for the real world.